All right, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Young Money Hackers podcast. I'm Charlie and you're here with HD. And today we're going to be talking about some of the mistakes that people make around property investing, particularly getting into their first investment property, the mistakes that we make long-term that will have a long-term negative impact potentially.
Yeah, right. And I think, these are very, very much worthwhile to bring up because a lot of people jump in. Actually, ironically, jumping in is actually one of the better things to do. But yeah, there is a lot of things that you need to consider before you jump in. And a lot of things seem like chaos until you actually bring it out to light and just sort of put it step by step, and then it becomes a lot more manageable. So that's what we're trying to do with today's episode. And we had a brief chat about this. And the first one is a very interesting one, is the fact that with first properties is that people have a fear of action. Of in itself.
100% true. So like, what are some of the things that really hold people back from, like, what are they scared of? In your mind, Handel, what do you think people are mostly scared of when it comes to property investing? What stops them from getting started?
I think a lot of the things that I see in my professional career and also in the general journey of, fellow investors, and not only just for their first property, but with each deal that they're trying to assess, is what if I haven't considered everything? All right. So that they so deeply desire to know everything when it comes to buying property. And that's that attitude is good. But if that attitude leads to what's called analysis paralysis, then basically you have a fear of action, which is what we talked about there, which
100%
is terrible. And the cost of fear of action is the opportunity cost. The long-term damages, right? You started a podcast saying that there is a long-term damage, right? There's a long-term negative effect of doing these things, or the long-term negative effect of not buying property versus buying property is so much worse, isn't it?
Exactly. It's like you become one of those people who are a gunner. You're going to do it. You're always going to do it. You always have this plan to potentially get into it one day, but you never lay out the plan in front of you to get started. So that is such a valid point. It can be overwhelming, but at the same time, if you wait for tomorrow, there's never a perfect time to do anything. Do not try to have the thing don't try and be too conscientious to the point where you never take action. You will never know everything before you start. You have to figure a few things out as you go. As long as you have a good roadmap like ahead of you, you have the fundamentals down, you're good to go.
Exactly right. And you know what? These people that don't take action because they need to know everything are often one of the smartest people. Like they're very book smart, you know what I mean? Like their IQ is super high and they tend to just know everything and hence why they've, I guess, developed that attitude as well. But I also find that they don't tend to be the most successful financially because they want to know how to do everything. So that's a bit of an issue. Sometimes in real estate, you got to leverage, right? I mean, first of all, you leverage money because you borrow money from the bank, right? But you also got to leverage talents, information, right? Know-hows across different people. That's why the whole purpose of Young Money Hackers is for people to be forming a community, right? We're here to be friends. That's the most important part. And that way, with that, we're going to be exchanging information, knowledge, and know-hows on how we can be the most profitable. And often those are the ways that you can wash out some of the fears that you have in taking action.
Yeah. Do this together. There's a community that everyone can interact with. That is one of the best ways to move forward together.
So what else is there in the list? So let's go down. We've got underestimating costs. So what does this mean, Charlie?
Yeah. Okay, so this is one of the biggest. This kind of connects pretty well from the previous point of fear around not starting because people want to know what could go wrong. Well, the costs are what people sometimes get into property. They don't consider all the costs that are involved, and that can put them into a negative cash flow situation. And also missing major things in property. For example, you go in, you buy something that might need a bit of work, which is great. We love a fixer-upper, okay? Like the worst house in a blue chip location has massive potential.
Exactly.
However, if the roof is fucked and you need a new roof, it's going to set you back 30 grand. It's like that is an unforeseen cost that you were not ready for. There are ways where costs can be overwhelming and that can set you back further than what you expected. And also running costs are another massive thing that I think people don't calculate. It's important to calculate everything that you do in any property acquisition. So if you, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Before you get going, it's no good finding out the cost of the asset once you've bought it, because then you're a negative cash flow. What are you going to do? It's unnecessary risk that you don't have to take on.
Exactly right. We added this sort of sprinkle at the beginning, which is we focus on taking action, right? But I want to sort of separate things that you can know and things that you can't know. Like, look, you can't know exactly what capital growth your property is going to have in the future.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I don't even know what I'm going to have for dinner for like next week, Friday. Like, so how am I supposed to know exactly what percentage is going to go up? I've got a good idea based on historical data and, sort of similar things that happen based on infrastructure and gentrification improvements within the local area, whatever, right? Those technicalities are in there, but that's not where you put all your eggs into, right? That's not the basket where your eggs belong to. In fact, if you are somebody that wants to know stuff, right, I think that's a great attitude. Like, if you're smart that way, then start finding out the information on things that you can know today, right?
Exactly.
So the point that we raised about like the underestimating costs, right, which is cost items, you can actually know about every single cost item today. How much is conveyancing going to cost? How much is your stamp duty going to cost? How much is maintenance going to cost? How much is insurance going to cost? You can actually do all that research up front. And I've got nothing against people doing that. In fact, doing so would be a very prudent approach to doing property investment.
And I think it's a really good point you made there. Like, capital growth is a speculation. You don't know how much things are going to go up in value. Anything you buy, by the way, any asset, whether it be crypto, stocks, real estate, you're not quite sure. The growth of that asset is speculative. You're not quite sure what that might be. That is the reason why it is so important to have the numbers that you can control down first. You have to be meticulous about that. And then you can let your guard down and take action.
Exactly right. And sometimes the calculation of these costs and I guess the forecast isn't about like nailing it, but finding a benchmark from which your investment starts to make sense. Does that make sense? So like, it's not just about, will it make 7% or 10% or 20%? No. Above what percent will you be profiting? Right? And what's unlikelihood of that happening should be the right way of thinking. And so, look, and that's part of the reason why, look, this is a product and this is a plug, but it's a valuable plug, guys. We are saving people thousands of dollars. Not only are we saving, but we're making people tens of thousands of dollars in equity because they're now identifying opportunities by running the mathematics and the calculation upfront. Like Charlie said, there's no point buying the asset and finding about the cost afterwards, right? Then you can find yourself in a pretty deep pool of issues. But if you do the math up front, then it's extremely valuable. We've had so many people take so much interest in this because, for a very, 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 very minuscule investment, right? For a 6-figure investment, basically you guys are going in there not blind. You got foresight on you to be able to plow through an investment where you know where it's going to take you over the next course of a year. And I think that's awesome. Visit Young Money Hackers, that's where the resources are.
Yeah, you guys definitely check that out. It's just it's just to take it's just to put you guys at ease. That is the main objective with that product. So I would highly recommend checking that out. Hendo, I got a bit of a question for you. What are your thoughts about buying property from your superannuation? What do you think that's something that people get wrong? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so people buy superannuation, right? Okay, obviously this podcast, not financial, no tax advice, right?
No, exactly.
Yeah, superannuation fund. So you can actually have your own superannuation, right? That's called self-managed super fund, SMSF, right? A brilliant conversation to have with your accountants, right? Now, if you have a slightly longer term goal or you've got some interesting ideas around property, always worthwhile mentioning that with your accountant to understand whether SMSF could be right for you. Now, that's more a question around structuring, and everyone's situation is going to look different. But yes, SMSFs do have a tax benefit if you were to do it right. So it's something that you need to look into. Now, SMSF is a massive topic within Australia. So I would probably park this conversation. So make sure you guys go and like, share, subscribe to our podcast so that when we do cover a podcast on SMSF, you guys can get a full lowdown on this. But that's where I'll leave it at this stage, right? Because it is a very big topic and it is something that every investor, property investor, should look into.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that I've seen people do it really well and get amazing results. The tax benefit can definitely be worth it. Again, we're not going to give you that advice, but 100% there is an opportunity there for people who might not be able to get their hands on the cash to get started straight away.
Exactly right. And to be honest, a property that makes money on SMSF is going to make money under a trust or company or even under an individual name, right?
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, it's for tax structuring purposes, all right? It may have offered different protections, of course, but at the end of the day, you're paying tax in Australia on money that you make, right? Not on money that you lose. So, if the same project exists under three different, and it made money, it will still make money.
I agree. Yep. No, well said.
That's right.
Another point that we've got down here is patience. I think this is a massive topic because you shouldn't be too patient in the beginning in terms of getting into your first property. I feel like that is where you want to take the most action and get the most research done and talk to the right people so you can actually get yourself into this game early. However, from then, you expecting to get rich overnight is not... Like expecting your property to double in value in like 3 to 5 years, I feel is an unrealistic expectation. I feel like it's more of a factor of being realistic with your expectations rather than, trying to be patient. What are your thoughts on that, HD?
Exactly.
Well, really quick, guys. Property investing can feel like an extremely overwhelming process because it's the biggest financial decision most of us will ever make. That's why we've developed these property investing calculators that are extremely easy to use. All you have to do is put in your numbers and it will tell you if your property investment is profitable or not. But that's not all. We also have a mentorship experience.
And that's right. We want to share with you all the juicy details through Young Money Academy, where you can learn step by step on how you can see yourself through to that end goal where you're profitable on all your property investments. We also have free resources available, so check them all out at youngmoneyhackers.com. Now back to the podcast. Yeah, I mean, patience is an interesting one. I mean, you got to ask, who are the most successful property investors out there? Are they patient people? Are they impatient people? Well, it's a bit of both, right? It's paradoxical because you need to be patient and impatient at the same time to be able to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve here. But I think the money is in the money. You got to follow the money. So patience has a lot to do with your emotions and the way you control your feelings and everything else. Rather than that, I would focus on the dollars and the cents. It's focus on the numbers. It's a numeric exercise, right? So you identify, okay, am I going to make money from buying this? Am I going to have cash flow from buying this? And how long will it take for me to then have cash flow that's positive after equity and refinancing and revaluation? How much am I going to then make out of this burr, right? This renovation? How much money am I going to make out of this development or subdivision? How much money am I going to make from buying this commercial property? So it has to be I would say patience is important, but I would say try to be more rational. And when something's make rational sense, then impatiently approach that deal.
Agree, dude. Yeah. Well said.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah. So another thing that I think we need to look at is property. Let me say it again. I'll edit that out. Another thing that I think a lot of young investors make a mistake on is a lack of proper research. So what is property research? I mean, there's no like textbook about this. There's no ABC to doing this. So let me ask you, Charlie, how do you go about your property research? And I might share how I do my property research.
Okay, awesome, love it. Firstly, I keep in touch with real estate forums and things like that, so you understand what developments are going on in certain areas. If you know that the government has forecast to spend a certain amount of money in a certain area, well, that is a really good indicator of growth in that area.
Exactly right.
So that's how we can identify like opportunities for capital growth in the near future. That also comes with other connections with other agents and economists that we've got. So like that's more how we get our hands on the data to actually make those assumptions. But also just the research, the exposure over time gives me an idea of the potential that a property has in terms of what you can do with it. For example, like how can you renovate this thing so you can get like a 100% return on your equity when you renovate it. Like if you invest 50 grand into a property and it builds 50 grand, like I've said before, That's not a good invest. Like you've achieved nothing pretty much. If you invest 50 grand into a property and you get 150 grand worth of equity, which is literally what the goal is, that to me is another way to. That would be something else that I would I would factor that into the equation before buying a property, like like renovation potential.
Definitely. Some of the ways I would approach property research is always thinking about the end goal in mind. What do I mean by that? So if it's buy and hold, right? Then why are you holding it for? You're holding it to actually generate rental income. Then instead of, you look at a whole list of properties that are for sale, and I look at which one's cheap, which one's not, whatever. There's a whole bunch of factors that affect price on property, of course. Shape of the land, size of the land, the slope pitch, right? Whether it's Taurus title, strata title, blah, blah, blah. But what I've looked at is the end product itself. So the end product for a buy and hold strategy is a property that's rented out. So I'll probably look at all the rental figures in the area. I'll probably be more interested in that, and then work backwards on the price of the property. And that's what I'll be looking at. So if exactly right. And when it comes to developments, right, if you're going to be then subdividing something into, 200 square meter floor plates, land sizes, and then you're going to put in, 180 square meter house on it, go and find out how much they're selling for first, and then work backwards, right? So that's what I'll be doing. So I think that's a good way to do proper research for property, is to keep that end goal in mind. If it's short-term rentals, go on Airbnb, what are those properties getting here on a daily basis, and apply a generic, occupancy rate, see how much money you can make that way. What's another strategy? The Burr method, sort of like, the worst house on the best street, right? But is it at a good enough discount? Is there enough premium left in it that you will do the works, you put the money in, and then you're going to be left with some more. So I think keeping that end goal in mind, I think is pivotal to doing proper research, and definitely leveraging onto the connections and the know-hows of the community, I think is extremely important. So let's work down the list. Another mistake people make is overestimating returns.
I think a lot of people have this idea that they can buy one property and then that's going to be the rent. They look at the rent and they think, yeah, that's good, like the yield. So the rent as a percentage of the value of the property. They look at the yield and they're like, oh, that's a good yield. That's a lot of rent. I'll get that property. There's more to the picture. Like we've mentioned before, it's like there is so much more to the picture than just the rental income. There's the property management fees, the running cost of the property, the maintenance and repairs, everything you need to factor in. As someone who owns property, it can be, you don't want to have it burning a hole in your pocket. You don't want it to be a pain in your ass. You want this thing to be serving you long term. So yes, good returns are good, but at the same time, you need to have a holistic picture of the figures around that property.
Exactly right. And I think just going a little bit under on your calculation is helpful. Obviously, don't do it to the point that the feasibility basically cracks up a pin, But obviously, looking at a bit of a range in price as well, so that you know where the cracking points are in your investment decision, I think is really helpful. And just working along the spectrum of profitability, I think is the right way to approach your estimation when it comes to pulling the trigger to do an investment. So yeah, you spoke about property management. So ignoring property management is another big mistake investors make. So what do we mean by that?
Well, property management is a fee that is taken out automatically. If you choose to have your property managed by a property manager, which I strongly recommend everyone do, unless they want to create another job for themselves, in which case you want your time to be worth, you've got other things, we presume you've got other things going on. But having a property management manager is well worth it. It's their job to do it. It takes the stress off you completely. You don't have to deal with any tenants, and it comes out as a percentage of the rent, usually between 5 to 8%. Usually around 7%, I'd say is average for a property management fee. But factor that in. That's one of the main things.
Exactly right.
So, yeah, another point that I wanted to bring up was, do you think buying in the wrong location, like where do you think people go wrong in terms of location handle, in terms of purchasing? Do you think there's a right and a wrong location people can buy? And what affects what's good and bad, or good and bad, in your opinion, in terms of location?
Yeah, look. Wow. So that is such a big question. I think a good location, I think such a thing as a good and a bad location does exist, but it'll purely depend on your investment objective, right? if you're trying to invest into retail shopping centers and your location that you're looking at is the middle of nowhere, right? Where there's sheep and cow and maybe a crow that perches on a one tree in a matter of miles, right? Like that's crazy, right? So I think starting from your investment objective first, then that will determine whether it's a right location or not. Now, apartments, for example, apartments as a capital growth in Australia in the middle of the city doesn't do particularly well, right? Because, it's brand new today, but tomorrow it's a day old and the day after is 2 days old, basically. And then...
And supply and demand as well.
Exactly.
On top of that, the production of apartments dilutes that value.
Exactly right. And also, and also it's going to always be, I guess, if you're going to spend that kind of money, you could easily find another property elsewhere with a bit of land that will appreciate so much quicker in value. But let's say your strategy wasn't that. Rather, you wanted to make cash income, like generate it, bang, 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 right? Short-term rental is a great example to maximize your returns on it. So then buying an apartment in the middle of the city or in a Hollywood, in a holiday destination is probably going to be a better location than if you were to look at 800 square meter land in the middle of the city.
Interesting. So you're saying that it can be a good idea to buy something without that land, regardless of where it is. Maybe it's in the middle of nowhere, but that has a dual strategy there. That gives you the option to then rent it out as a short-term rental. You get returns like Airbnb.
So I'd say the best strategy is when you can crack or realize a strategy that seems impossible to the many, but you can crack that somehow.
Okay.
So, or it doesn't, you don't have to necessarily pioneer it. You can also be the one that sort of jumps on the bandwagon of that trend. So let's say there's a new small town that's popped up. Not many people know about this town, but it's a tourist destination, and you can find yourself a nice little unit that's really cute and cozy, and it's really low price because people think that it's in the middle of whoop. But if you were to be able to do Airbnb and gain some crazy returns, go for it. Life is great. If you know that there's an infrastructure change that's coming into an area that's pretty low socioeconomic, and then you buy that expecting some higher capital growth in later down the track, well then for somebody who's seeking lifestyle, will look at that place and go, wow, that's a terrible place to live. I'm not going to go to that location. But for a person like you, it'll be a fantastic location, and then you'll take action and then boom, on your way. So that's a really good way to think about it. So bad location and good location starts to exist once and only once you have a strategy that's well established.
Totally agree, dude. I think it would be lovely to be able to say, hey, this is a good area and that's a bad area. But it depends on you personally as a person who wants to buy property. Like, what are your goals? What type of property and for what purpose are you wanting to buy it for?
Exactly.
There's opportunity pretty much everywhere. It's like, what about people who purchase their property and they want to satisfy the grant? You know how they want to satisfy the first homeowner's grant, and then they go buy a property in a really bad location. Bad meaning like bad. Okay, in a far away location where they would
buy a whole strategy.
Want to live.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Yeah, exactly right. They're getting into the property that they might see as a stepping stone, which is what we advocate here at YMH. But then they go to live in it and they realize they hate it. They can't stand it. It's like, I think that's a mistake that people can make. And the mistake in that is not recognizing the, how do I word this? Not recognizing how it will impact your lifestyle.
That's not recognizing how the asset services your strategy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So it's like, if you have that strategy going forward, fantastic. But just know that it will come with a bit of sacrifice. Don't expect it to just be sunshine and rainbows. But this is all part of the process. This is what we encourage you guys to do.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And look, we talked a lot about mistakes and risks about property investment today, but we genuinely don't want to scare people off. I mean, I'd rather people make mistakes in property than mistakes in anywhere else in their life, because this is going to teach you a lot of things, and it's going to help you understand how to then take the best course of action, as you go along. Property is something that I think every human being should at least have a crack at understanding or trying to exploit, so that it services you, because it is an amazing tool. It's an amazing industry. And I think, the purpose of today's podcast wasn't to scare people off, but it's for people to be empowered to know that there is a way. Okay, what we need is a little bit of.
It's all about the plan. It's all about getting a plan together, not overthinking it, but creating a plan that gives you the light at the end of the tunnel, so you know which action to take. Everyone's going to make mistakes. Nothing is going to ever be perfect. I just want to stress that. It's never going to be perfect. That's okay. That's what it's supposed to be. That's the whole point. So just make sure you guys have a plan, mitigate the risks where they exist. Problems arise when the risk is not mitigated. Like if you think something is risky, it's just a lack of education. There's just things that you don't know, and that can always be mitigated. So when someone says, "Oh, that's too risky," just know that there's more to the picture. There's more to learn.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. Youngmoneyhackers.com is the website to visit if you are a beginner or even a well-seasoned investor. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so that you can stay updated with all of our latest episodes on everything that is property investment. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you later.
Cheers, guys.